Marcel Sternberger was a creature of habit. He used to take the 9 minutes past 9 o'clock Long Island Railroad to Woodside every morning. Now, on the morning of January 10th, 1948, Marcel boarded the 9 minutes past 9 o'clock as usual train, but suddenly decided to visit Laszlo Victor, a Hungarian friend who lived in Brooklyn and was very serious. He wanted to pay him a visit because he knew that he wouldn't be around that much longer. As a result, Marcel hops on a different train, a train that he had never taken before. The compartment was crowded, but just as he entered, a man sitting by the door suddenly jumped up and left, and Marcel slipped into that empty space. Now, as a photographer, Marcel had developed the habit of analyzing people's faces and was moved by the features of the passenger to his left. The man was reading a Hungarian newspaper and had a look of one who was deeply hurt and pained. Marcel Sternberger, being an Hungarian descent himself, eventually begins to strike up a conversation with the fellow passenger. And this opened a conversation that neither of them could ever forget. Now, Marcel learned that his fellow traveler's name was Bela Paskin. Marcel then asked Bela Paskin what he was doing in New York City, to which Bela replied that he was in the city looking out for his wife. Now, Bela Paskin then said, "Well, my wife and I used to live in Debrecen in Hungary, and during the war, I was taken away and made to work in Ukraine, burying the Germans dead. Now, in time, I managed to escape and run back to freedom. And when I returned home, I found that my wife had also been taken away by the Nazis to the concentration camp. Now, one of the neighbors said that they thought that she had been taken to Auschwitz, and therefore she would have been killed in the gas chambers. Someone else told him that they thought that the Americans had arrived just in time to save some prisoners and taken some of them to America. His wife might have been among those who, according to him, were rescued. And he said, by a long shot, I am hoping my wife is here in America." Now, Marcel knew Debrecen quite well and listened with interest to his story. The more he listened, the more familiar the account sounded to him. Providentially, Marcel had recently met a woman also from Debrecen. She was sent to Auschwitz and later transferred to a German munition factory. Her relatives died in the gas chamber and her husband had been captured by the Russians. She was liberated by the Americans and came to US on the first boatload of displaced people in 1946. Marcel was so moved by her story that he wrote down her name, her address, and her telephone number. Now, as they neared the station, Marcel casually asked Bela Paskin if his wife's name was Maria. Bela turned pale and asked, "How did you know?" And when they got off the train, Marcel took him by the arm, led him to the phone booth, and dialed the number that he had. Marcel handed the phone to Bela, urging him to be calm and advising him that he was about to witness one of the greatest miracles. Both Bela and Maria were crying hysterically. Marcel took the phone and told Maria that her husband would be there in only a few minutes. He hailed a cab, gave the address, paid the fare, and sent him on the reunion of his dreams. Friends, skeptical persons will no doubt attribute the events of that memorable afternoon to mere chance or rather occurrence. But was it chance that made Marcel Sternberger suddenly decide to visit his sick friend and hence take the subway line that he had never taken before? Was it chance that caused the man sitting by the door of the compartment to rush out just as Sternberger came in? Was it chance that caused Bela Paskin to be sitting beside Sternberger reading a Hungarian newspaper? Was it just an occurrence? Was it a coincidence? Or was it providence that afternoon? From a human perspective, it certainly appears that the unlikely reunion between Maria and Bela Paskin were only a coincidence. However, they were far from that. They were orchestrated from an all-knowing and all-seeing God. Have you ever experienced a series of seemingly random events that somehow aligned and caused you to be in the right place at the right time, or absent from where you were expected to be at what turns out to be the wrong time? These Random things happen to us all the time, but we often write them off as coincidences. But they are not. It is the providence of God, and providence is the protective care of God. Friends, in my own life, there are countless events that were more than ordinary occurrences or coincidences. They were God's divine intervention and was the hand of God at work. Such occurrences of divine providence, small and large, intersect everyone's path every day. Look closely and you will see God silently at work in your own life. We walk around with the myth that we are in control or we control our destinies. However, there is a limited, finite amount that we are in control of. What we control are our choices and our responses. Our choices provide the illusion of us being in control, but we are dots in this world's landscape. So our control is huge to us, but minuscule in the grand scheme of things, because there is so much that we do not and cannot control. It is providential that our destinies are intertwined, and the great intertwiner is God. He alone allows the timely preparation for future eventualities. He sees how the strand of the braid will affect the other, and that when they are woven together, they make a beautiful masterpiece. Ravi Zacharias, in his book The Grand Weaver, How God Shapes Us Through the Events of Our Lives, recalls a visit to the northern city of India in Varanasi, known for making the best wedding saris in the world. Now, with such intricacy of details, he said that he expected to see some elaborate system of machines that would boggle the mind in production. But this image could not have been further from the real scene. Each sari was made individually by a father and son team. The father sat above the son on a platform, surrounded by several spools of thread that he would gather into his fingers. The son had only one task. At the nod from his father, he would move the shuttle from one side to the other and back again. And this would then be repeated for hundreds of hours until a magnificent pattern began to emerge. The son certainly had the easier task. He was only to move at the father's nod. But making use of these efforts, the father was working to an intricate end. All along, he had the design in his mind and was bringing the right threads together. Friends, the pattern that God has been weaving is unlikely to be noticed at first. It may seem to you just as a bunch of disparate threads, but when you stop and focus on God's weaving of your life, you can't help but notice a beautiful tapestry unfolding in your life. God alone can weave a pattern from a disparate threads of our lives, whether suffering, success, joy, or heartache, and fashion a magnificent design. Perhaps today, if you will stop and reflect on it, you will see that the Father is seeking to weave a beautiful tapestry in your life. Friends, we need to discover how the unseen hand of God guides the multiple threads of our lives, our joys, our tragedies, and our daily routines to weave a pattern of divine providence and meaning. Our lives would be different if we believed that every event of our life, from a happy to the tragic to the mundane, was part of a beautiful and a purposeful design in which no thread was, is, and will be wrongly woven. We need to remind ourselves that our life is not just random and a meaningless strands of thread, but they are precise designs woven with remarkable care, thought, and intent by God.